Well, hello, and welcome back to another exciting edition of Coffee with Stephen. So, this week's blog is entitled Wolford, and most of you guys are already familiar with this name. It's, of course, the decision that we recently received from the Supreme Court in the case of Wolford v. Lopez. Now, it's a good decision, right? It focuses primarily on sensitive locations. It absolutely, without any ifs, ands, or buts about it, kills off the vampire rule. The argument that private businesses must proactively invite armed CCW holders into their shops. That's done, okay? It also gives some pretty strong weight for effectively killing off all of the other sensitive locations that exist. They have to effectively go through a Bruin analysis to prove up to the court how restricting someone in, say, a library is consistent with our nation's history, text, and firearms regulatory traditions in both 1791 and 1868. That's another development that's come from the from the Wolford decision. As many of you guys are familiar, because I constantly refer to Bruin and the constitutional test that it employed, the history, text, and regulatory tradition in 1791 approach, there has been an argument amongst academics for several years now since Bruin that we shouldn't just be looking at 1791, we should also be looking at 1868, because 1868 was when we ratified the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, which then incorporated fundamental rights directly into state constitutions. Prior to that, prior to 1868, the Bill of Rights only restricted what the federal government could do to you. State governments were completely free to abrogate your rights. But after 1868, with the 14th Amendment, those fundamental rights get incorporated into state constitutions. So effectively, it becomes irrelevant whether it's a state actor or a federal actor. That all being said, when we had Bruin originally, it was just simply 1791. In the Wolford case, it now is both 1791 and 1868. This does make our job a little bit more difficult, quite frankly, because in 1791, there were very few gun control legislation that existed out there. In 1868, when we are in the middle of the Industrial Revolution, well, the number of regulations actually have expanded at this point. So the state is to have the ability, the state now has the ability to look for analogous legislation in both time frames. In any event, it will be interesting to see how this moves forward. I do hope you read the blog. It goes into this in much greater detail and probably does a better job of explaining it than I just did in this video. But of course, as always, train constantly, train consistently, train repetitively, and train with purpose. Above all else, stay safe.